The next panel is the use of disinformation narratives in warfare, sponsored by Boris Mintz Institute, and I would like to invite the director of the institute, Mr. Petr Pesov, to moderate the panel. Petr.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So I would like to invite the participants for our panel. We are joined today by Brigadier General Itai Brun, who served as the head of IDI's analysis division and in 2011 to 2014, and was called back for his position for several months in 2024 during the war with Gaza. We're also joined by Dr. Ariel Koch from Reichman University. We are joined by Dr. Melanie Garson from University College London and Mr. Netta Marom from NextDim. So please. So we're very happy to be here, and honestly, as we have seen in the past few years in two major conflicts, which has been the Israel-Gaza war, and together with Operation Rising Lion, as well as the war in the Russian full-scale invasion in Ukraine, narratives have been used extensively as means to conduct warfare. And so we assembled some of the biggest experts on the topic from all walks of life to discuss it at length. I would like to start with Brigadier General Brun, and we would first focus on the events of October 7th. So leading to October 7th, how did the deception operations of Hamas impact the narrative of successful deterrence, and how did we end up with the strategic surprise that we ended up with?
First, thank you for inviting me. Your question, and I think it's according to the conventional wisdom, is trying in a way to view deception and surprise as two different things. And of course, looking for the influence of one on another. But actually, and I'm presenting here a study conducted by Michal Reichman, a researcher, and myself, based on Hamas original documents that were captured in Gaza and either released or leaked to the media. So one of our key conclusions were that these are not two separate things. On the contrary, there is a powerful link that connects perception, deception, attack, and surprise. Actually, these are the different aspects of the same phenomenon, of one phenomenon. I think the best way to explain it is through Hamas perspective, because Hamas had some kind of a triangle in their operational and strategic thinking. They thought that victory, their definition, of course, to victory, we can discuss it later, but they thought that victory cannot be achieved without surprise, and surprise cannot be achieved without deception. So they had this kind of a triangle of victory, surprise, and deception, and this in a way organized their operational and strategic thinking on the road to October 7th. So according to what I think can be understood from these materials, Hamas conducted a calculated and deliberate deception campaign that included three elements. The first was strict concealment of intentions and preparations. There were many things that were known to many operatives of Hamas, but for example, the precise timing of the attack, certain elements of the scope of the attack were concealed, were only known to a very small circle of trusted people. So the first element was strict concealment. The second element, and this is what we usually associate with deception, was the deliberate transmission of false signals, mainly in order to make the Israelis believe that things are routine, irregular. For example, even in the document that was leaked with Yehia Sinwar notes to one of the drafts of the attack plan, he writes that near the breach points there should be activity in the weeks before the attack in order to make the Israel become regular, think that it's a routine. But I think that the main thing, the most challenging aspects of the deception effort was something that can be defined as natural yet ambiguous conduct, behavior, designed to mislead. So in this third element, Hamas was doing real things. For example, it were not things that were not natural. For example, Hamas did not retaliate when we attacked the PIJ, the Palestinian and Islamic Jihad. Hamas really maintained calm, but they did it not as an alternative to the military initiative, but to build up their forces. They needed the calm for other purposes. But when they decided to act in this way, they understood that it will have a deceptive meaning. So at the bottom line, deception, according to this case study, worked within our perceptual system. It exploits known cognitive biases. You asked about the outcome. So very shortly, I think there were three outcomes. First, can be defined as false uncertainty. The Israelis were sure that, for example, Hamas is deterred and committed to what was called the arrangement, but they were wrong. So this is false certainty. The second implication or outcome was blindness to some aspects of the attack. And the third outcome was something that can be defined as paralyzing uncertainty. Specifically during the night before the attack, warning signals were coming alongside with calming signals, and the people who were on the discussions, they needed to be more certain, and in a way they were paralyzed.
Thank you. I guess one thing that we learn is that narratives are not only how the enemy is trying to deceive us, but also sometimes the things that we tell ourselves and how that affects our preparedness for
And that it is connected.
and that the two of them are indeed connected. I would like to stay in the realm of October 7th and switch to Dr. Ariel Koch and ask the following. So anti-Semitism is perhaps one of the oldest and widespread forms of hate speech narratives that lead to violence. How have you seen it develop after October 7th?
So first and foremost, thank you for inviting me here. This is a great question because since the October 7th attack, we are seeing how Hamas and other terrorist organizations are using misinformation and disinformation in order to advocate for anti-Semitic views or to promote anti-Semitic narratives. One of these narratives is that Zionism is a demonic or evil ideology, and therefore Jews or those who support Zionism are actually manifestations or representatives of evil. Therefore, the delegitimization and demonization of the Jewish people in general, the state of Israel in particular, and generally speaking, Zionists or anyone who claims to be Zionist or supports Zionism is something that needs to be studied and understand. Because one of the main things that Hamas has done since the October 7th attack is to convince people that Zionism is evil. And this idea connects Hamas to many other ideologies, including those that are not motivated by Islamist or Islamist extremism, including anarchist extremists, neo-Nazis, black supremacists, white supremacists, you name it. All of these groups and ideologies actually embraced the concept that Jews are evil, and each of them use different terms in order to legitimize violence against Jews. Now, the problem is that even if someone is pushing for anti-Semitic narratives against the Jewish people, it doesn't mean that the target will eventually be the Jewish people. Meaning, in some cases, we saw people who publish manifestos online using the same derogatory terms that Hamas is using in their propaganda, but then eventually decide to go and attack an LGBTQ bar in Bratislava. We see people who use the same narratives the same anti-Semitic narratives of Hamas, and then choose to attack a school in the United States. We see it again and again, and this is a serious problem because we see how anti-Semitism nowadays serves as a glue, as a connective tissue between different ideologies. And Hamas know that, and Hamas use it to promote the same concept of delegitimization and demonization of the State of Israel, Zionism, and the Jewish people. Now, once they're using this concept, that Jews are evil, and Jews are representative of evil, so they can connect to other ideologies, as I just mentioned, that use their own terms, and in some cases the same terms, in order to convince their audience or to convince their followers that Jews are indeed evil. One of the main terms that we see circulated in extremist spaces is the concept of synagogue of Satan, a concept that emerges out of the New Testament, but nowadays is a cross ideology, cross-racial, cross-geographical view that connect different extremist actors in order to operate against the Jews and to legitimize violence against Jewish people, regardless of their opinion, regardless of their nationality, and regardless of anything that has to do with their own existence. And this is a serious problem that we need to address because it's not going to disappear anytime soon. And we see it. We see it with the demonstrations on daily basis all over the world, from North America to East Asia. We see people demonstrating and using the same derogatory terms against the Jewish people because Hamas were smart enough to weaponize this concept in order to convince people that Jews are a legitimate target. And this is why we see people demonstrating outside synagogues without any connection to Israel or to the State of Israel. And this is unfortunately something that we need to address and we need to fight against.
Thank you. I think one of the most fascinating things that we have seen in the past few years is that it's all sides of the political aisle and all sides of all groups of people that are involved in public activity that have been demonizing the Jewish people and the State of Israel, sometimes mistaking anti-Zionism for anti-Semitism, but with the bottom line being that most of the hate speech that we have seen directed at Israel has been very anti-Semitic in terms of demonizing Jews as people. So speaking from the theoretical perspective and moving on to detection mechanisms, Netta, I would like to ask you a question as someone who has been extensively dealing with finding the algorithms and finding the people who are basically in charge of those smearing campaigns. So what has Next Team been able to find following October 7th? And in general, what is there in the field of disinformation from the Israel-Hamas war?
Okay, thank you, Petr, for the question. I would start by saying that from the technological point of view, from the technical point of view that Next Team is viewing the issue, it was not a Hamas-Israeli conflict. It was a large-scale, worldwide conflict with many powers that came to play and manifested their abilities to manipulate and create coordinated efforts and campaigns. Some of them to directly support Hamas, both tactically. So in several stages of the war, we have seen actual campaigns that aimed at helping Hamas achieving specific militaristic achievement. but they were not Hamas-orientated. They came from other parts of the world. Maybe they even were not initiated by Hamas. This is on the tactical, operational level. We have seen a lot of groups that are utilizing or taking Hamas as a pawn in their chess game to achieve other world interests. As a quick example, what is the role of the Israel-Hamas war in the context of maybe the greater, the bigger conflict that is currently in Europe between Russia and Europe? So we are some kind of also a pawn in this game, Hamas and also Israel. We also have seen Hamas working against the Israeli society in Hebrew, and doing, if I may say so, a very, very good effort, and from my point of view, personal point of view, even a successful one. We have seen Hamas influence abilities being reduced during the time of the war, and we've seen other parties come into their shoes, taking their shoes, and impersonating Hamas, or following up on campaigns that are clearly Hamas. And we've also are seeing and have seen in the past groups that, for example, during the time of the previous administration in the United States, were left-wing, anti-Israeli, pro-Hamas. And now same groups of users or same patterns of activity are anti-Israeli, right-wing Americans. So they are to the right of the current administration. So same group, different messages, different narrative, one aim, to be anti-Israeli and to be effective in the United States. I think this is for them.
Thank you. I would actually like to take one of the points that you said about how this disinformation conflict and the use of the Israeli-Hamas conflict has been seen in the larger conflict that is currently happening in Europe between Russia, Ukraine, and NATO. And I would like to turn to Melanie as someone who also focuses on governance systems in Western countries. So what are some of the examples of disinformation narratives that you have seen in the past few years that malicious actors have used against Western countries and Western institutions?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me, and pleasure to be here today. And I think, just drawing across what everyone said, I think deception and warfare is nothing new. It goes, although I was rereading Sun Tzu, actually, for teaching again. And, you come back to this as a fundamental part of warfare. It's a layer of warfare. It's accelerated by the tools that we have. I think going to the points of this intersectionality driven by the learnings or the shared learnings of our adversaries is something that we've underestimated, sort of and we've seen this particularly in the course of the war. We've watched Iran and the extent that they've taken on Russian tactics, or where there's, clearly shared learnings. And that's playing out where you'll then see in the protests where you've got anti-Israel protests flying Russian flags, or where you'll see Russian conspiracy theories into the information sort of domain that is anti-Israel or pro-Hamas content, and where we're seeing this intersectionality of it coming from all sides. As far as, Russia has always, which is why I look at, the predominant source that we're looking at in Europe, Russia has always, from an operating concept, and I think that's what's been misunderstood in the way that Western militaries have sort of put together their various strategic arms, where everything's been very separate, that Russia's always included the information domain as a key lever of their offensive strategy, and it is fully integrated. So when we talk about hybrid warfare, or Sahel, or digital warfare, where it's fully integrated into their strategy as a lever of their strategy, alongside their kinetic warfare, alongside their operational cyber warfare. They'll hit a satellite, they'll create information chaos, they'll roll in the tanks, and it's all part of a holistic strategy that we underestimate. And we consistently also very closely look at our own domains So whether that's, and we forget to look at where they may be sowing sort of mistrust about us externally. And so you talk about where's the most recent, the biggest one. I happened to be talking in a conference in Romania a couple of weeks ago. I finished my talk, take off my headset. The guy says to me, "Can you sit down for a minute?" I was like, "Okay." I was like, "What?" He's like, "I just want to talk to you." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Is it true that King Charles has dissolved the parliament because he hates Keir Starmer?" I'm like, "Pardon?" I was like, "What? When did this happen?" And I was like, literally, because I'd been talking at 9 o'clock in the morning, so I hadn't really checked the news. I was like, "What, kids?" I was sure it had come up on my Apple feed. I'm like checking my Apple feed. I'm like, no, I think Parliament's still there. I'm like, sure, Parliament's still there. And he was like, "No, but I've read about it. I read it." He was utterly, absolutely convinced. And it really puts you on the front line of where, we're looking at the misinformation, disinformation in our own backyards, and we're not fully tracking where we are in other people's backyards, and particularly where a, top of the game player like Russia is using this very holistic strategy, not just in your own domain, but also to sow chaos in other domains, to fundamentally break down trust in the reliability of the Western alliances. And I did come back and go through the rabbit hole and see where this came from. And there were face groups that had all these put together videos of old things of like King Charles, castigating Keir Starmer. So I think it's a very pervasive atmosphere. It's an absolute challenge of our times. And I think we need to acknowledge more where it's constructed or integrated into operating concepts of militaries as a strategic tool. And it's not just the byproduct of that.
Thank you. So I think despite the fact that there is some challenge of attribution of information and deception operations sometimes, and Netta can correct me if I'm wrong, and probably will change that in the coming years, hopefully. We can definitely see that Russia is perhaps one of the biggest actors that has been spreading malicious disinformation. So Ariel and I actually have met briefly when both of us have worked on some projects on disinformation that Russia has been spreading in Ukraine. And so I would like to turn to you and ask, how would you say that the narratives that Russia has been spreading have been used both domestically and abroad by it, so sort of also from the standpoint of domestic public opinion and also as a sort of foreign influence on the domestic opinion of foreign countries?
So, great question, thank you. I would like to focus on the concept of the alleged denazification of Ukraine, which was the main excuse for Russia to invade Ukraine. Now, denazification is problematic, especially nowadays in the 21st century, because I think that Russia needs to invade all the rest of the world, generally speaking, including their neighbors in the US, Philippines. You can find neo-Nazis all over the world. So going out to denazify Ukraine, I'm not sure that this is a serious argument when they came to invade another country. Now, this thing of claiming that they are going to denazify Ukraine actually led to two outcomes. The first is for Russia, is pro-Russia, and the other is against Russia, or pro-Ukraine, if you want. So first and foremost, when Russia claimed that Ukraine is a Nazi state, or Ukraine enables neo-Nazism, so some people from the West, for instance, or from India and many other countries, came to the conclusion that they need to join Russia or the Russian side in order to fight against the Nazis, right? Because Ukraine is a Nazi state. So we saw communist, anarchists, and other far-left radicals moving to Ukraine, thousands of people moving to Russia and joining the Russian side in order to fight against the so-called Nazis. But it also had another outcome. And this other outcome led to people who came to the conclusion that if Russia claimed that Ukraine is a Nazi state, it can mean that Russia is a communist state. And if you want to fight communism, so you need to join the Ukrainian side, right? And this is where we saw thousands of people moving from their countries and joining the Ukrainian side. including some neo-Nazis. Now we must, to make it clear, neo-Nazis exist everywhere in both sides, okay, in Ukraine and in Russia. Okay, I think that Ukraine was clever enough to integrate such radical elements into their army. Russia has done the same on their side. But this claim that they are going to fight against the Nazi Ukraine, something that led to real consequences, with serious consequences, not only in Ukraine, but also in the West, because we see people who support Russia or who support Ukraine clashing in Western countries because of the same argument, because of the concept that, because Russia said that they are going to denazify Ukraine. Okay, so those who support Russia and those who support Ukraine might clash in Western countries because of the same ideas, because of the same false narrative that Russia tried to establish. And this is something that, again, it's still going on. Okay, we're still seeing it on a daily basis, and it's not limited to one or another particular country. It's something that it's much more widespread. And as you mentioned, it's something that it's ongoing efforts and ongoing campaigns by different actors to highlight this concept in order to create destabilization of Western countries, for instance.
Thank you. I think this also very much relates to the Russian influence on anti-Semitism and on the Israeli-Hamas war. Specifically, I don't know how many people remember, but at some point the foreign minister of Russia has called Zelensky a Nazi. And when asked how Zelensky, a Jew, can be a Nazi, he basically live on television said, well, Hitler was also Jewish. So
if you repeat the lie many times, so eventually there will be some folks who will.
So, as part of the Russian narrative against Ukraine, one of the things that Russia was projecting very much from the early days by saying that it will take Kiev in 3 days, if it really wanted to, and everything, is the sense of victory. So I would like to use this in a different case, which is Israel versus the axis of resistance, and specifically Iran, that after Operation Rising Lion has been projecting onto the world that it should be seen as the victorious party in the conflict, which probably not that many people in the audience agree with, but I would like to understand why they project this feeling on the domestic population, and what impact it has on both domestic and foreign attitudes towards the whole security situation in the Middle East. So,
so yes, they are claiming victory. And you mentioned Iran, and yes, Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran after the war in June, made a speech where he congratulated the forces for victory. And they also named Garson, the leader of Hezbollah, in January, also said it's a victory. So what is this victory that they are talking about? I'm using the term theory of victory in order to explain their concept of victory. And what is theory of victory, generally speaking, is what is victory and how it can be achieved. And of course, it's not the victory they were dreaming about. In the last few years, I think from 2020 or 2021, some key figures among what we call, and they also call the axis of resistance or the resistance camp, key figures among this camp were developing a concept according to which, if circumstances will be good for them, they can defeat Israel and even bring about the destruction of the state of Israel. So this is a theory of victory. It was a new theory of victory that emerged during the last few years. Actually, it was the third version of theories of victory of this resistance camp. The first theory of victory was developed during the 80s and the 90s, and I think it lasted until the Second Lebanon War in 2006. And this is the concept of victory through non-defeat, or winning by not losing, which I'll explain in a minute, because I think they are coming back to this concept. So this lasted until around 2006. where they started to develop a new theory of victory, which can be titled something like winning by points. Yes, we will be damaged, we, the resistance camp, will be damaged, but Israel will also be damaged, and in the end, people will know who won because Israel will suffer much severe damage. So when the war started, and I think that what Hamas did on October 7th was part of this new concept of decisive victory. They knew they were not sure that they would succeed, but they thought that if circumstances will be good enough, this might be the first move toward the destruction of the state of Israel. Now, when the war started, they understood that decisive victory will not be achieved, and this whole resistance camp went back to this idea of winning by not losing. So why winning by not losing is a victory, and to what extent do they really believe that it's a victory? So first, why it's a victory according to their perspective? First, because they were fighting the bully of the neighborhood, the mighty Israeli force, and survived. And if they can survive, it's a victory because they were not defeated. This is one element. The second element to explain why it's a victory is highly connected with them being a resistance entity. So at the end, it's a concept, it's an idea. If this idea survives, it's a victory. They have a general understanding, a general belief that someday Israel will collapse because of its internal problems. So if they survive, eventually it will happen. Israel will collapse. But I think that the most interesting element of why victory through non-defeat or winning by not losing is a victory is because of the third aspect. And this is, I think, this reflects close acquaintance, deep familiarity with our thinking. And they understand that in our thinking about war, we seek decisive victory. And if they take decisive victory from us, it's a victory. Because for us, it's either a decisive victory or a failure. And if it's not a decisive victory, it's probably a failure. The most interesting question, do they really believe? Here I think that yes, in a way they believe. And some of the people among their organization and states do believe that it's a victory, that they can achieve a victory by not losing.
So it makes me wonder if this feeling of victory is organic or it's also caused by echo chambers that the people are involved in. And furthermore, with the amount of, for example, channels that we have seen on social media, it's more of a quantity problem where people are exposed to so much information that keeps saying the same thing over and over, which is altercated and is a clear sign of disinformation that is used by governmental actors, that people actually start believing it just because the amount of it is too large. So Netta, as a company that is trying to help the world to detect those malicious actors, how do you think we should scale up the technology to make sure we're there to detect the insane amounts of malicious actors that the world is facing?
Okay, thank you. With your permission, I will start with the last point that you've touched on, both Itai and himself. And of course, I think it was said, I just want to say it, reiterate it. So if Israelis are expecting victory to be a decisive victory, and victory was not decisive, then we have a full-scale war, full-fledged war that can happen on the influence dimension that will convince Israelis that they have lost. So it's the beginning of a war, of a new war in another dimension. And it's a good start for a war when I think about the abilities of IRGC and other Iranian influence platform to penetrate Israeli society. So just a remark. What technology can contribute? So there are limitations to technology. From a pure technological point of view, I think immense advance was made during the 2 years. I think a new world of patterns of activity, of methods of operations was established, and technology is developing, and I think we can see much more, understand much more, maybe later on expose the public to much more. So I think from a pure technological point of view, everything is okay. I think technology here, it's not, I'm an old cyber guy from early days of cyber here in Israel. I don't think there is a complete resemblance. I think there is some resemblance between counter-influence and the early days of cyber, but I don't think this analogy is extremely accurate. I think for tackling the issues of influence, there need be the cooperation of the platform owners. And if this cooperation cannot be achieved, then there is a call for the involvement of legislatives and lawmakers and policymakers. I think this is extremely important. We are not trying. We should not try to. We are living in the democratic part of the world. So we appreciate democracy very, very much. The activity around influence is non-democratical by essence. There are some parts there that touches on freedom of speech, touches on tracking people. We are dealing as next in patterns, but to make something of it, you have to maybe get to the people, or at least understand who is a human being, who is a machine. Maybe now even machines are being protected by the platform owners because they have interest in this. Data of the platform owners is the basis for their AI efforts, which is the main driving force today in the industry. And this power of the platform owners is not limited, or is not currently being discussed, I would say, in the fact that Europe is against the US in the way that it sees its policy, the fact that there's a clash within Western civilization on that. There is no, urgent need or feeling that some kind of a common decision can be taken, some kind of common values should be discussed, is a problem currently. So my answer about technology is very strong. We've seen things we never imagined to see. We learn methods develop methods that we've never imagined that we will develop. But I think that actually the ball is in the court of the policymakers, also a little bit of the philosophers.
You almost made it into a seamless transition to my question to Melanie, which is an expert on governance. What strategies should be adopted by international alliances and institutions in order to combat mostly the zombification of domestic populations by harmful actors that try to spread disinformation?
Yeah, thank you for that easy question. But then echoing a little bit, and I do love the Iran's totally glass is always half full strategy. And I think there's two ways to look at that. One is, and I talked earlier today about psychologically realistic digital twins where you can test messaging on. But I think there's one attitude is that we know these playbooks, we know these strategies, we know that pre-bunking always comes better than debunking or having to rebuild this information to set the, particularly in given context, to set the expectations of people of what's going to come their way. So they kind of know the pathway, the sort of weather forecast, if you want, of what's going to happen in your information environment. I think you hit on what really is the lever. This is now the information environment. I mean, it's like, it's in effect the water of our daily lives. It's, if you want, the digital water of our daily lives, and it's becoming increasingly toxic. And for those companies that are building their entire ecosystems on this, I think it's sort of bringing a different frame on this, because if it becomes too toxic, people are just going to disengage, and you're seeing sort of different movements away from it. And the extent to that, the large-scale companies which rely on this data are just going to be building products on a toxic wasteland or synthetic data, which neither of which is going to be formative. So the question, you're right, we're in a clash of regulations, regulator versus regulated, that we've seen this week again. It's come back into, with Musk saying like Europe should cease to exist and a national security strategy for the US that seems to echo a little bit of that. But to really think about where are those levers of power of sort of what is the content eventually, are any of the data-enabled tools going to be useful if they're built on a toxic wasteland of, the digital information environment becomes that poisoned. And I think that's where we can begin to look at making headway with the people that are fundamentally the gatekeepers of the information.
So it seems that all of us and all the people that are interested have a lot of things to do, especially considering that those disinformation narratives, while they are only a means of war and is not necessarily a kinetic means of war, they do very oftentimes have a kinetic effect that it leads to. So I would like to thank our participants. I would like to thank the organizers of Cyber Week and wish everyone a very successful rest of Cyber Week.